Hi, everybody. This is Esme. We will be getting started. I'm going to hand this over to Diane Boyer.
Thank you, Esme, and hello and welcome everybody to today's webinar on the Mockingbird Family Model. My name is Diana Boyer. I'm with the County Welfare Directors Association, and this is part of a series of webinars that we're hosting to support county efforts in recruitment retention support of resource families, especially foster parents and relative caregivers. We had an initial meeting on August 21st at Convening of Counties where we presented just a very brief excerpt of what the Family Mockingbird model provides. And with us today we have an excellent presenter to share in greater detail what the model is and how counties may implement the model. I do want to just remind folks that right now there is an all-county letter that was sent to counties, ACL 1576, that has a template attached to it that requests counties to submit their plans for recruitment, retention, and support in the coming year. There's $15 million available, statewide general fund dollars approximately, for counties, and those plans are due December 1st. So the purpose of this webinar hopefully is to provide some information for you in a timely way to help inform your local plans. So today's presenter on the Mockingbird Family Model is DeGail Cooper. I'll just tell you a little bit about DeGail. She's the Director of Family Programs at the Mockingbird Society. Since 2008, DeGail has been working with the Mockingbird Society, which is a Washington State-based nonprofit advocacy organization. There, DeGail has been an expert on replicating the Mockingbird Family Model to implement systems change and train child welfare teams to increase their agency's organizational effectiveness and productivity in delivering foster care. DeGail is a senior program director, and in such capacity, she's led public and private child welfare agencies in their replication of the model, both nationally and internationally. DeGail has 30 years of experience in child welfare as a social worker, a consultant, a foster parent, and the model's very first hub home family. And that expertise has fueled, and her passion has fueled her work, which she brings in transforming the delivery of foster care and improving outcome opportunities for children, youth in foster care. So with that, I will turn it over to DeGail to present the award-winning Mockingbird Family Model.
Thank you so much, Diane, and welcome everyone to this webinar. Again, my name is DeGail Cooper, and I'm excited to be part of this presentation today. Just to give you a little information about the Mockingbird Society, we were an organization that was actually founded in 2001, and we are really dedicated to improving the lives of children, youth, and families in the child welfare system by building a world-class foster care system. Next slide. A lot of our work is around collaboration, innovation, and advocacy. We use the voices of young people who have been in the foster care system. We help elevate their voices so that they can advocate for change in our state's child welfare system in order to improve the delivery of foster care and increase or end youth homelessness. So that's a little bit about the work that we do in general as an organization here based in Seattle, Washington. My role as the Director of Family Programs is to work with organizations to help them take good care of those people who take good care of our children and youth. And we use this model as not just a little bit of information out there. We really strongly believe that if we have systems of support around foster families, that they truly are going to be able to take the very best care of kids and their families. Next slide, please. Next. So the Mockingbird Family Model is a very innovative model. It's really based on extended family concept. So it's family-centered, it's relationship-based, and it's really about bringing together communities that can care for each other. The model's foothold is in foster families need a level of support that enables them to, number one, have the resources that are needed to take very good care of the kids in their home, and number two, that allows them to receive the peer coaching and mentoring and support that all of us, if we're parents, need in our lifetime when we're raising children. When we come into the foster care, when families come into the foster care system as foster care providers, the one thing that they really want to do is their very, very best in taking care of kids. And unless we provide that platform for them to do that, then they're going to struggle. So we believe here at the Mockingbird Society that the Mockingbird family model is a framework within which organizations can help their foster families do their very best. Next slide. So our priorities are really about improving foster care delivery, safety and stability, and improved well-being for children that are in foster care. And then the third point is really about foster parent retention, recruitment, and improved satisfaction. This model has been in effect since 2004, as I had mentioned before, and we have seen tremendous outcomes for our children and families that have been part of the model since 2004. In Washington State, the retention rate for foster families is hovering at about 50 to 52%. And it's been at that level for at least a couple of decades at this point in time. And so we haven't really seen a lot of progression in our ability to recruit the foster parent pool that's needed to support all of the kids that are in care, which is in Washington State close to about 9,000. And we haven't really been able to see foster parents increase their longevity in foster care. So with this model, we have seen outcomes that our state would love to see for all of its foster families. So as I go through this a little bit more, I'll talk a little bit further in this presentation about what some of those statistics look like. Next. So just to talk some about the model. The model is very simple, it's basic, it's clear. And it's really based on this centralized system of support. And this centralized system of support is what you see in the center there, the hub home. It's kind of like grandma's house in a way. So what we take is a licensed veteran foster care provider who in some ways already is doing this type of work in their community. This veteran foster parent is someone who is connected to the resources in their community. They know how to navigate the foster care system. They have strong connections with resources such as schools, maybe even the police department, but definitely with the local child welfare office. This center support system is the stronghold for this, what we call the constellation community. So if you see where the orange dotted lines are, they extend out to what are the foster homes and kinship homes that where the children are placed. Most of these homes have, in our state, the capacity to foster anywhere from 1 up to 6 children. And when we're developing a Mockingbird family model constellation, we're very intentional about how we put this community together. And when I talk about intentional, it's real important that we look at who the kids are, what their level of need is, who the foster families are, and even what their level of need is around how much support do they need to be able to do the job of taking good care of the kids that are in their home. So when we work with organizations, we do a lot of planning around how do you develop your Mockingbird family model community. If you look at the dotted line that goes around this constellation community, what that dotted line represents is the organization. And we call that the host organization. The host organization is that entity who places children into the foster homes that are being supported by this centralized system of support. The host agency also helps to keep this community together. So anything happening within the dotted line is managed and basically controlled in some ways by that host agency. What we really try to express to many of these host agency services is that it's important for them to begin to look at how they can do business differently. We all want to be innovative. We all want to be able to improve foster care delivery for the children that are in care, but oftentimes we forget a key factor in that, and that key factor is taking good care of the families that are taking good care of those kids. And you'll hear me say this a lot during this presentation because we believe that really is a very important principle in this model. So the host agency has to see this hub home provider in a very different way. We talk about the professionalization of a foster family, and that's exactly what's happening here. The host agency is working with the hub home as though they are an extension of their social work team. On the outside of the circle, you'll see what are adoptive homes and biological homes and chosen home. When children, there's a plan, a permanency plan always in place for young people that are in the foster care system. And our goal is to help also improve the options for permanency for kids that are in the constellation. One way to do that is as children transition out of foster care, perhaps into an adoptive home, or they return to their biological families, or maybe they age out of the system and they choose a chosen home. We want those permanency placements to be secure, to last for a long time. And so built into this model is an option for kind of supporting that transition for a 6-month period. And when I talk about supporting the transition, what that means is that the children that are in those satellite homes that are inside the circle already feel this deep connection to this community that they've been brought up in. These people who act as aunts and uncles and cousins know this youth. They know, what it takes for this young person to feel, safe, stable, and secure in their community. But oftentimes when kids transition out of the community, things are very new for them, and that can also cause a sense of, fear, perhaps trepidation for children. But if they can remain connected to this community that has provided the support to them in some way, and we can engage the biological family or the adoptive family or the chosen family into the community, then that creates an extended, even more extended community for the youth. I guess I would ask, are there questions about that? But I'll just go on with this presentation. Next slide, please. So the Mockingbird family model is built on these principles, basically. We start off with unconditional community-based care. And when we talk about unconditional community-based care, what that really means is that we are accepting of all the community members. Foster parents come with different skill levels. They come with different levels of, experience in raising children. Some are brand new. Some have been raising children for years, and even their own children. But in an unconditional community-based care, what this means is that we are a shared learning community. We're all learning from each other, and by doing that, we not only help enhance the skills of foster care providers, but we also help increase the competency level of children that are in foster care. Normalization. This concept, this philosophy or principle here is really about how do we normalize foster care? How do we help children that are involved in the foster care system feel like they are like their peers? And the way to do this in the Mockingbird family model is to engage a group and engage in activities that are similar to other kids. In some states, it's sometimes difficult for a youth that's in foster care to have overnights at a friend's house. Lucky for us in Washington State, we do have the Prudent Parent bill, and that allows foster parents to make those type of decisions for their children. But in other states, they haven't advanced quite as far. So how does the model help with normalization? Well, it gives kids other adults to develop relationships, to develop these kind of peer mentoring relationships with each other as youth, and to know that they are not the only ones who are in foster care, which sometimes children believe because foster families can be so isolated from each other. The third principle here is continuity of care. Many times when young people come into foster care, they have multiple placements. And with the model, the goal of the model really is to stabilize foster care for kids. So if there's going to be any movement of that child from one home to the next, the intention is that they stay within the circle. They stay within the constellation. So one family may prove to be maybe not the ideal family for this particular youth's needs, but there's a cohort of 6 to 10 families that make up this constellation. And so you've got an option between all of those other families to look at what they can offer this youth and if they can be a better match for this youth's needs. And it's a great situation because what happens is that, let's say if there is a placement disruption that occurs, and it's unplanned, it's unintentional, we can use the hub home provider as that resource for offering the respite care that children need in order for social workers to begin to do the work of trying to figure out how will we work with placing this youth into a home that can better meet his or her needs. And I'm sure folks will ask some questions about that, and I'll be able to answer those. But I'm going to go on to the active child protection. I talked a little bit about foster parents sometimes being very isolated. We come into this work of social work, doing foster care, etc., and our goal really is to use the internal resources sometimes that we have to build this system of support for the kids. But oftentimes what we forget is that we need each other. And so when I talk about active child protection, what we say is that there are more eyes on a community. One little example that I give of this is a young man who I had the experience of being with in the constellation, and he always talked about he didn't want to be the only child in his foster family. And even though this foster mother only wanted one child and she was doing a great job with this young man, he just felt like he wanted more siblings around him and he didn't want all the attention to be on him. So, when he came into the constellation, he was able to develop relationships with many of the other foster families that were there so that he could have outings with them. He didn't have to spend all of his time with this one particular foster parent. The other part about the active child protection is that, here at the Mockingbird Society, we say it's not if you have an allegation against you as a foster parent, it's when that allegation will occur. And so if you're working within this micro community of foster families who get to know you as a foster parent, and you have your child welfare system representatives working with you in this model, and they get to know you on this very different level, they can be there as advocates for you if there are allegations because they know you better. They know you deeply and understand, the resources maybe that you might need as a foster care provider in order to begin improving your ability to take care of kids. So just active child protection. Then there's the stabilization to permanency. Obviously, we want all kids to have a forever home, and this model contributes to that. We find from our social workers here in Washington State that they often say that with the hub home provider doing the day-to-day work and support that foster families need, that they have more opportunity, more time to work on permanency plans. And when you have more time to work on permanency plans, then you can make smarter, more intentional choices about what that permanency plan can look like for kids. The cultural relevancy piece is really around oftentimes children are placed with families that maybe don't reflect their own culture or their ethnic background or their racial makeup. But in a constellation, you can build a community so that it's diverse, so that there's someone that is like me or looks like me in some of these other families that make up this constellation. The cultural relevancy piece is real important in this model because we don't want to just create group homes or treatment facilities. We really want our community to be a very diverse community so that, again, it's that whole shared learning concept where we're learning from each other. Families are able to work with a range of children, and foster families learn to support each other on a range of, who have ranges of experiences. And then caregiver support. I mean, that's what this model is all about. It's about really providing the support that families need. And when we talk about a hub home provider, we really talk a lot about them being on board 24/7, 365 days of the year. And although that might sound scary to some, like, oh my, how can I do that? The reality is that when we've got a strong, good, working constellation community, it's not just the hub home provider that's doing the work. It's not just that one centralized system of support. It's the whole community working together to support each other. And ideally, what is happening within that constellation community is that we are mentoring and cultivating and developing the next hub home provider, and that's how we began to expand the model. Next slide.
Miguel?
Yes, next slide.
Yeah, I'm going to pause just for a second for a question.
Okay.
This is regarding the previous slide. And the question is the host agency child welfare?
So the host agency can be any child-placing organization or agency. We work with our child welfare system in the state of Washington. We also work with individual private child-placing agencies. And it just depends on, how the organization comes to us. But on some level, there's another tier here where Mockingbird also works with organizations that are like umbrella organizations for like a network of child-placing agencies. And we call that a replicating agency as opposed to just a host agency. So a replicating agency kind of takes on the same role as the Mockingbird Society, and we have what's called a train-the-trainer program that we kind of put them through so that they understand the whole process of replicating the model and fidelity and all of this in order to expand the model within their umbrella network.
Okay, good. And here's another question. How close in proximity are the foster families?
That's a very good question. We generally say foster families need to live within 6 to 10 miles to a hub home. But what we have found over the years is that it's really not about the distance. It's about the time proximity. It's about how convenient, what amount of time is a good amount of time that will allow that foster family to come to the hub home for monthly activities, for respite support, for social activities, even when it's rainy and the weather is horrible and it's dark outside. That piece is just real important. It has to be convenient.
Good. And here's more questions. So how does the hub home provider get compensated?
So the hub home provider, as we work with host agencies and replicating agencies, we have a formula that we use here in Washington State, and basically the hub home provider has to maintain 2 open licensed beds for all ages of kids, 0 to 18, and all genders. And so they are provided a retainer for maintaining those 2 open beds at all times and providing respite, a monthly constellation meeting, and facilitating trainings and facilitating social gatherings. So every organization or every state and every organization that we work with, their pay, basic level of pay for a foster family is very different, but the formula is about the amount of money that it costs to maintain the 2 open beds, plus here, I'll give you an example. We take $2,400 and we give a hub home provider $1,700 to maintain those open beds and do the work of the hub home provider. $300 is also provided in order that's activity money, to help with the monthly food or whatever that constellation is doing together. And then $400 of that is a reimbursement for the additional insurance that foster families in the state of Washington need to get on their homeowner's insurance policy and their auto policy so that they are protected as these other families are coming into their home. But each organization that we work with is very different, and they take this basic formula and they fit it to whatever works within their organization.
So about how much is the annual cost for a hub home?
So based on how we do it in Washington State with our child welfare system, it's about $32,000 a year to support a hub home provider, and that's at the traditional foster care level, and about $50,000 a year if the majority of families and kids are BRS or high-level need children.
Okay. So there are a few more questions, but we need to move on, and we'll save those for later.
Okay.
Okay. I'll move to the next slide.
So in replicating or implementing the model, obviously there are always roles and responsibilities for everyone. And the building block here is that we have the host agency who is really in charge of replicating the model. The Mockingbird Society is, we're an advocacy organization. We provide the technical assistance, the consultation, and the training to support organizations so that they can either one of 2 things, be a replicator or an implementer. The second tier is the hub home family. They have a huge responsibility. In fact, probably the primary responsibility for keeping that constellation community together. And then the satellite home or satellite families, which are all the other foster parents who are engaged in that community. Oftentimes what we say to them is that they are volunteering to be part of this community that will take care of its children, but at the same time they have a responsibility to be intentional about how they use this community. Next slide. So just looking at the host agency, again, the host agency is really responsible for licensing and supervising the foster parents, whether they're a hub home provider or they are a satellite family. They are still in charge of all the work that they typically do, which is case management and supervision of children, and then training of foster parents and also support of foster parents. The difference with the model is that the work of the social worker or the host agency is elevated. with the hub home provider at the center of the Constellation community, like I said, some of the day-to-day activities. And take, for example, a foster family might call their social worker and they've got maybe an issue that's going on with a kid in their home. They need some support with some transportation, getting this child back and forth to a doctor's appointment. And in this case, that's the kind of work that when social workers are involved in that, there's a large cost to that because, you know, they're trying to navigate maybe the caseload of, 15 to 20 youth and families, whereas this hub home provider can be that person that actually goes to that satellite home and helps to transport that youth to a doctor's appointment. So again, the hub home provider really is not there to replace a social worker or to replace a case manager. They're there to support them in that role so that the work of social workers and case managers can be elevated so that they can be focusing on permanency planning for those children. Next. So this is kind of like what I talked about, the hub home just really building community and managing the day-to-day operations. The role of the hub home provider is critical in the success of the Constellation community. And for most organizations that we work with, this is where we spend the most amount of time helping them to find and train and support their hub home provider. So as organizations come on board with using the Mockingbird family, we have some replication planning stages, 6 planning stages that we actually go through to help walk these organizations through this whole process. Next slide. So again, just to kind of give you an idea of some of the roles and responsibilities of that hub home provider, as I said, they are responsible really for setting up that constellation, checking in with families, seeing how families are doing, getting to know them so that when there are crises or when there are situations where they need more support, that foster family has a good understanding of what that family's needs are. The respite, planned and crisis respite. So whenever most kids that are in foster care and if foster families are isolated, oftentimes if a family needs respite care, those children go to just any family that might be available, or maybe they might go to the family members, the extended family of that foster care provider. But in this Constellation community, these kids get to come to the hub home. They come to the hub home for any kind of planned and crisis respite. It's like going to grandma's house. They know this person. They are familiar with the surroundings, and it's like going, home for them again. So the hub is also responsible for organizing the activities and events. Some of those activities and events are centered around cultural relevancy. They can be centered around what's going on for that foster care community itself. They can celebrate birthdays together, and so those things are all important in this community. The re-entry point. What we are focused on there is many foster families with teenagers experience teenagers running away. And how nice it would be if a teenager, when they ran away, they didn't have to move from that foster home, that they'd have the opportunity to actually come back to that foster home, mend that relationship, learn some new skills on how to manage, the crisis situation that gets them to the point where they feel that they need to run. It would be even great for that foster family to be supported in being able to provide the level of supports that those youth need, those teens need, that might keep them from running. So the hub then acts as a re-entry point. So I'm a foster parent, my teen has run away, I'm upset, I can't believe they've done that, I'm not ready to take them back home in my house when they come back, but they can go into the hub home. There's some coaching and mentoring that goes on there, and then after a couple of days or so of respite and just everyone's feeling a lot better in that situation, that teen can go back to the satellite home that they were in and begin to mend that relationship and move forward. So it's, again, a very intentional community with the support of the host agency. Young people and foster parents are able to work better together and provide a supportive community. Again, so I've talked about some of these other points on here, but the foster care hub home provider is really trying to manage the safety for everyone in that community, and that's why it's just so important for the host agency to be very intentional about how they develop the Constellation community to start with. Another responsibility of the hub home provider is researching resources. They need to be able to navigate the system, but also to develop resources in the community that might support the foster families and the youth. An example of that is that when I was a hub home provider quite some time ago, we had many young people, very young kids in our constellation, and many of them needed a lot of medical attention. And so I was able to develop a relationship with our community health care clinic. And they sent, at our monthly meetings, they sent a representative in that got to know those families, got to know those kids. And when they went to the clinic for their appointments, the kids felt more comfortable and the families felt more comfortable taking the children to the clinic because they had developed a relationship and these people had been in the constellation at the monthly meetings to kind of get to know them. Next slide. So we try to always think about the Mockingbird family model as we are improving the retention rate of foster families that are involved in the model, who are involved in the foster care system. And when we look at the national foster parent retention rate, we always say it's a bit of a moving target. There's not a lot of data out there that you can find about, the national retention rate, but some of the numbers that we've looked at are anywhere from 42% to 60%. I know here in Washington State, we're at 50%, about 52, depending sometimes. But we're trying to move our marker to 75% retention rate here in Washington State. And part of the success that we're having with the model is that we are finding that those families, we've had over 200 families involved in the Mockingbird family model just in the last couple of years. And we are finding that we already currently have a 90%, next slide, 90% retention rate for families that are engaged in this model. Next. So the model, in a sense, really helps to close a lot of system gaps. The whole thing around caregiver isolation, or bringing families together in these micro-communities where families are closely connected in geographic proximity to each other. We're closing that gap on instability in care. Foster youth are building deeper relationships with foster families, not just their own foster family, but others, so that when they do transition out of care, either at the age of 18, they have potentially other families or chosen families that they can choose from within that constellation so that they have permanent options in their life. The loss of community of origin, the whole model is really centered on really trying to keep kids in their communities of origin. If we have a constellation that's in a particular zip code area, the goal for a host agency is to place kids from that particular zip code into the constellation, to find foster families that are within that particular zip code or county area, if it's a small county, to try to keep these kids in their same communities so that they can go to the same schools and be on the same sports teams. And then the other piece is around sibling and birth family connections. This model really supports that. Oftentimes in care, Large sibling groups are broken up. Kids are disengaged from their birth families. And this model, even if a child can't be in the same home, siblings can't be in the same home with each other, they surely can be in the same constellation with each other. We find that as children, as the social worker or case manager is working on that permanency plan, and that the plan is that that youth will go back to their birth family, the constellation in the hub home are a great resource for trying to support that transition back to a birth family. So, for instance, a social worker might determine from that host agency that a birth family can participate in some of the monthly activities that that constellation group is engaged in. Or they might have birth family or sibling visits in the hub home as opposed to an obscure office somewhere or a McDonald's or something like that. And then again, the whole thing around permanency. Permanency is, it's defined differently wherever we go. And most of the time when we think about permanency, we think about kids being adopted or we think about them returning to their birth families. But permanency also is this whole thing around young people, when they exit care, being able to have a community that they've been engaged with so that when they are those 20-year-olds or maybe even those 30-year-olds, they have an opportunity to reconnect with them because their life circumstance, we know that at age 18, oftentimes young people are not ready to be on their own. And if I was living in a constellation and developed a relationship maybe with 2 or 3 or 4 other satellite families, they are potential forever homes for me because of the relationship that I developed with them. So it's that whole chosen home concept that we talked a little bit about earlier. Next slide. So Teen Mockingbird, on a structural level, what does this look like? Well, it looks like the children and youth in the center. You've got your child welfare system on the top, and the community supports the Mockingbird Society and the foster families. This whole system working together with each other and across systems in order to support the children and the youth in the middle. Next. So a lot of folks ask, how do we do this work? The Mockingbird family model is just that. It's not a program. It's not a service. It's a framework for organizations to use in order to conduct the business of improving foster care and taking good care of the foster families so that we can retain them and help them, recruit them, So the Mockingbird Society uses 4 fidelity elements to help organizations stay on task with what the goals are of the Mockingbird family model. So the host agency has a large task of helping to maintain the integrity of the structure, and there's different indicators that go along with that. It's important that there are stakeholders at every level within the organization, but also stakeholders that are also at the community level that help to champion the Mockingbird family model for an organization. So in order for an organization to implement the model effectively, there has to be strong communication at all levels within the organization, and a host agency has to make sure that all the competencies that are described in the criteria for implementing an effective Mockingbird family model are being met, that those are being adhered to. So part of the Mockingbird Society's role is to manage the fidelity of the implementation and the replication of this model. And we work very closely with agencies in order to help them understand the fidelity and to work through that and then be able to manage the fidelity of their own constellations at some point in time. Next slide. So oftentimes when we're working with organizations, I just thought that we'd just kind of put out there different challenge areas. And again, I talked about it's real important within any organization that is deciding to take this model and use this model that you champion this model at the highest level within the organization. There has to be a project leader on this. And the communication needs to flow from the top to the bottom at all areas within that organization. So you have to have commitment at all levels. And everyone within the organization has to understand the Mockingbird family model as that strategy for improving the delivery of foster care. So the model doesn't come in and it doesn't necessarily have its own policies and procedures. What the model is about is looking at your own policies and procedures within your organization and finding a way to use this model to improve your delivery of foster care and the support of foster families. And those 3 points there are probably the key points that we, as the Mockingbird Society, as the consultants and trainers and technical advisors, really try to hone in on when we work with organizations. Next. So if an agency decides that they want to work with the Mockingbird Family Model team, we walk them through 6 planning stages. And these 6 planning stages can take anywhere from a 3-month period of time to 6 months. And any time after 6 months, what we oftentimes say is that the organization really isn't ready to do this work with us just yet. And it's not that we stop working with an organization, we just back up and get a really good footing and try to work with an organization at their pace. So it could take longer. But those organizations that have done these different steps, that have good leadership from the top, who have a champion within the organization, who've communicated throughout and have commitment, ideally they can go from the planning stages to launching a constellation within 90 days, 3 months. Next. Thank you for your interest. I'm open for questions.
Hello. Hi, everybody. So we have quite a few questions, so I ask for your patience. What is the incentive for hub homes?
The incentive for hub homes, that's a good question, because we find that a lot of most agencies talk about, oh, wow, we're never going to be able to find a hub home provider that will want to do this kind of work at this pay that they get. And the thing that we always say is that, there are already people in your community that do this. And they do it without even getting a stipend or a retainer that goes that supports that. The incentive for a hub home provider is that this is almost like the next level of fostering support. And I'll give an example of myself. I have been a foster parent, or was a foster parent for just over 13 years. And one of the things that was very hard for me, I was a social worker, had been a clinician, had been working with families and children since I was 18 years old, and I thought that fostering would be really easy for me. And I got this child who had a huge amount of needs, and it wasn't that I was not aware of these needs. I very much was, but when this child came to my home, one of the things that I realized is that they felt safe enough to begin letting out some of those other areas of trauma that they had experienced in foster care and in their own home life. And I needed an organization that could really support me, but most of all support her with the resources that she needed. And I didn't get that. I didn't get that from my host organization or my licensing agency. And after, for this particular child, after just about a year fostering her, I decided I was never ever going to do this thing again. I was done. I felt so defeated and inept at taking care of children just because of this one experience. And that's how a lot of foster parents oftentimes feel. You know, they feel like they're doing this hard work, and if they don't have the support and resources that they need from their foster care agency, that they just give up doing this. But this model allowed me, and it has allowed other foster families to feel like we have a system of support around us. And so that's the benefit there. I knew that I could support other foster families. I knew that I wanted other foster families and other kids to have successful relationships with each other, and I could do that job well. So you're looking for hub home providers who have that kind of attitude, who have that sense that, wow, I need to move up to this next step because the work that I know I can do is to keep these kids together, to keep these families together.
So you mentioned a trainer. What is
Yes.
the cost for this? How lengthy is the training, and who is trained?
So if an agency wants to be a replicating agency, we have it's a 5-day train-the-trainer, and the individuals that are trained, hopefully they are people who are, some agencies have consultants who do training already within an organization or within a network. And ideally, we would be training those individuals. We would be training key people who would be in charge of replicating the model with other host agencies within that organization's network.
Does the training come with technical assistance for a period of time?
Yes, it does.
Can you clarify? I'm sorry. The 1,700 is to keep open beds for children to be placed in that home, or is it reimbursement for being a hub home, and there is no expectation that they take children?
No, it actually is a retainer. So a hub home provider must have those 2 open beds and must take kids that are in that constellation for placement, for respite care. So the $1,700 is to maintain the 2 open beds for that host agency's constellation community.
Okay. One participant asked, I love the idea of the runaway youth being able to return to their foster home. However, often youth run away for extended periods of time, and with such high need for foster home, vacancies in this home need to be filled. So there isn't necessarily a bed home to return to. What happens then?
So that's your current system's way of thinking about this. And with the Mockingbird family model, again, it's about improving foster care, looking at your current way of doing business and thinking about how you might do that differently. So a young person runs away. Yes, they might be gone for an extended period of time, but if the goal truly is if they've developed relationships in that constellation community, and I can tell you, I had a runner in our constellation every Friday just because they wanted to go hang out, and they couldn't necessarily do that all the time, and and sometimes that youth would go for a week. Take off for a week and hang out with her friends. But this foster parent who was this mother who was her foster parent, the one thing that she always held on to is that when this child understands and learns that all of these people in this constellation care about her when she takes off, and if you look on the Mockingbird Society's website, we have a video of this young person. And I encourage every one of you, if you haven't already, to go onto the Mockingbird Society's website and watch that video, because that's the young person who I am talking about, who returned to her foster family and is now actually adopted by her foster family, even after running away almost every Friday.
How do homes recruit within neighborhoods and communities?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question?
How do the homes recruit within neighborhoods or communities?
So the hub home provider works with the host agency team on whatever the host agency team's recruitment plan is. The hub home provider is an extension of that team and can help with the recruitment, but the job of being a recruiter is really the agency's responsibility. So when we work with host agencies, the Mockingbird family model is a strategy for recruiting more families. When they know that they can come into a foster care system and have this level of support up front, that is definitely an incentive for them. So the hub home provider can be that voice of the Mockingbird family model, helping and supporting the host agency with their recruitment plan.
Do existing as well as new families have the option to opt in or not in a constellation?
Yes, they do. In fact, when you are first starting off, what we say the best way to develop your first constellation community is to look within your existing pool of foster families and get people to volunteer for that. So the community, the cohort is 6 to 10 foster families and anywhere from 6 to 18 youth in a constellation. And so you might want to start off with perhaps like 6 existing foster families. That might be, let's say, a total, if they all have 2 kids each, let's say 12 kids. And so you save some space because you know you've got a recruitment strategy or plan going on, and you want to recruit some new foster families that are coming into the community, into that constellation. So the work that we do with host agencies is really to look at, what your recruitment goals are, what strategies can we use, can we support you with in order to help you achieve your goals.
Can the host agency be the child welfare government agency, or is it better to have a separate agency?
I'm assuming what you're asking is like your child, so a child welfare government office, kind of like the Children's Administration, is the host agency, and they have different local offices. Is that?
I think that sounds right.
Okay. Yeah, that's exactly what we do here in Washington State with our child welfare system.
And then finally, will the slides be emailed to participants? And the answer is yes. If it's
yes.
Okay with you, DeGale.
Okay.
Is it okay?
Absolutely.
Okay. And then another question just came in. Have you found that there is a minimum number of homes the Have Home can support?
Well, the minimum number to be within fidelity is 6.
Okay. Well, that concludes. If there are, I don't see any more questions. If I think that this is the end. Thank you, everybody, for joining, and thank you, DeGale, for taking your time to teach us about the Mockingbird model.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.